and welcome to In Their Own Words, the story of the American experiment in the words of the people who made it happen. Hi, I'm your host, Pete Fenza, and we have a spectacular episode for you today, and an important one. What do you really know about our Constitution? What does it do? What does it say? What are the principles and theories behind it? Well, those questions could take many episodes. But for today, we're going to tell the stories of why the Constitution was needed and how the Constitution happened. Now, both these questions make up one great story, but I think it would be too long to try to put them both together at the same time. So we're going to have part one of this episode is going to be why the Constitution was needed. And then we'll follow quickly with part two as to how the Constitution happened. Now, the short answer to the first question is that the infant United States of America was falling apart. It was disintegrating, and it would soon cease to exist. And in its place, America would fragment into smaller confederacies and individual countries, all contending against each other, waging war against each other, and falling prey to European powers. The road from independence to nationhood was not a certain one. To appreciate this crisis, we need to go back in time and add context to our story. You may remember from episode 11 about the Declaration of Independence, how Richard Henry Lee of Virginia submitted a resolution for independence to the Congress on June 7th of 1776. The third part of that resolution for independence contained a resolution to send to the states a plan for confederation. And so while the Committee of Five was drafting the Declaration of Independence, a second committee, chaired by John Dickinson of Pennsylvania, was charged with drafting Articles of Confederation to bind the 13 colonies in a loose union better able to fight a war against Great Britain. The plan of union, which became the Articles of Confederation, were drawn from a plan submitted by Benjamin Franklin to the Congress a year earlier. Franklin's plan was altered significantly in committee, and much to the detriment of the plan. But a plan of union called Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union in the handwriting of John Dickinson was reported out by the committee to the Congress on July the 12th of 1776. And for more than a year, the Congress would repeatedly debate and amend this document until finally, on November 15th of 1777, a final draft of Articles of Confederation were submitted to the legislatures of the 13 states. But the Articles of Confederation would not become effective until the legislatures of all 13 states ratified it. And that didn't happen until March 1st of 1781, more than 3 years later, when the legislature of Maryland finally ratified the Articles of Confederation. They had withheld consent until resolution of disputed land claims over lands west of the mountains. And so the United States government operated under the Articles of Confederation from March 1st, 1781, until March 4th of 1789, when it was replaced by the Constitution of the United States of America. We had fought almost the entire Revolutionary War without a constituted government, depending upon the cooperation of the states through an ad hoc Continental Congress. But it was the Continental soldier who suffered most from this dysfunctional system. Several times during the course of the Revolutionary War, the Continental Army was on the verge of starvation. They were poorly fed, if fed at all, and they were poorly equipped. Many of them were never paid for their faithful service, and some were owed back pay for years by the Congress, and their families became destitute all for the want of a solvent national government. State militias, however, were paid by the states, and so they fared somewhat better than the continental soldier. So let's examine this revolutionary government and see what a mess resulted from it. The major provisions of the Articles of Confederation are this. First, it was an agreement among the legislatures of the 13 states of America. This agreement among the legislatures formed what was called in Article 3 a perpetual league of friendship among the states, which sounds a lot more like a club than a sovereign country. And each state retained its sovereignty, freedom, and independence. In fact, Article 2 of the Articles of Confederation states as follows. Each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, and independence, and every power, jurisdiction, and right, which is not by this Confederation expressly delegated to the United States and Congress assembled. Well, very little was delegated to the Congress, and even then, not effectively. There was only one branch of government. There was no executive branch. There was no judicial branch. There was simply the legislative branch, which was Congress. And there was only one House of Congress. There was no House of Representatives or Senate. There was just the Congress. And the members of the Congress were appointed by the state legislatures. Delegates to Congress could be removed and replaced at the whim of the state legislatures for any reason or no reason at all. The Congress itself was supposed to have authority on war and peace, on raising armies, foreign policy, and creating post offices and the like. But all taxing power was with the states. The Congress had no money whatsoever and was utterly dependent upon the states for revenues. Now, during the Revolutionary War, the states were highly motivated to stick together to fight their common enemy, Great Britain. But once the war wound down after the Battle of Yorktown, and even more so after the Treaty of Paris on September 3rd of 1783, which ended the war, things quickly came apart. And here's why. These are the reasons we needed a new constitution. There was no sovereign country called the United States of America. There were 13 sovereign countries acting imperfectly in concert through a Congress under the name of the United States of America. The national government of the United States was not elected by the people, but by the state legislatures, who could remove and replace members of Congress at whim. As a result, the members of Congress were more beholden to the objectives of the state legislatures than they were to the will of the people. And so, widespread corruption and abuses of power inevitably followed. In a very real sense, the Confederation Congress was not a Republican form of government at all, but was rather an oligarchy of the state legislatures. There was no executive branch of government, nor was there a judicial branch of government, either to enforce and execute the laws or to interpret the laws and to administrate justice. As colonies, we were ruled by royal governors, and judges were bureaucrats appointed by the crown. Our revolutionary fathers experienced these two branches of government as instruments of tyranny and oppression, and they feared them. And so they eliminated those two branches of government when we formed our revolutionary government under the Articles. The national government was weak and powerless, and intentionally so. It had no ability to tax. It was dependent upon voluntary requisitions from the states to function. Congress could not compel the states to pay requested funds, and the states ignored over 90% of the requests for money from Congress. In essence, the authorities given to the Confederation Congress were illusory. Congress had neither the power nor the means to enforce its authority. Well, even if Congress could enforce its laws, which it couldn't, it took a 2/3 majority of the states to pass a law. And that meant 9 out of 13 states had to agree to propose legislation before it became a law. And it was exceedingly rare that 9 state delegations even bothered to attend sessions of Congress. A major flaw in the Articles of Confederation was its failure to promote a national economy based upon open and uniform rules for interstate commerce. Instead, the 13 separate sovereignties were protectionist in their policies, imposing taxes upon the goods of outsiders and trade restrictions which favored their own merchants. States with no foreign ports, like New Jersey and North Carolina, were at the mercy of their neighbors. Add to this rampant corruption and jealousy for power, and national prosperity became a forlorn hope. In the lands west of the mountains, conflicting territorial claims worsened the tug to disunion. When the colonies were first founded, very little was known about the lands west of the mountains, and so many colonies did not have western borders when originally charted, and this led to these land claims. Foreign interference by England and Spain particularly fomented frontier warfare with Native American tribes. Half of America's landmass was under attack with no effective response from the national government. At the end of the Revolutionary War, the American economy was a mess. Both Congress and the states had borrowed fantastic sums of money to pay for the war. Congress had no money. Some of the states had no money. And so they resorted to print worthless paper money, which fueled inflation and turned a post-war recession into a deep economic depression. And farmers in particular were driven deeper into debt. Both the Union and the fabric of society were being torn apart, and thousands of men who had served faithfully in the Army during the war were never paid. Their pensions were never paid. Their families became impoverished. They were living at subsistence level. And with despair over an impotent national government, the country was primed for an eruption. And so armed insurrections occurred in many places. The most serious of these insurrections was called Shays' Rebellion in western Massachusetts, which lasted from August of 1786 until February of 1787. The fraternal bonds forged during the Revolution were unraveling under the fiction of a national government. People were not blind to the inadequacies of the Articles of Confederation. Henry Knox, who was the great problem solver of the Continental Army, wrote to his good friend Gouverneur Morris in early of 1783, "As the present Constitution," meaning the Articles of Confederation, "are so defective, why do not you great men call the people together and tell them so? That is, to have a convention of the states to form a better constitution." As early as 1783, the Confederation Congress tried repeatedly to amend and to improve upon the system of government, but to do so required the unanimous consent of all 13 state legislatures, and that unanimity never occurred. And so for the next 4 years, every attempt to improve upon our system of government failed. By 1785, it was clear that the Articles of Confederation did not provide a workable system of government. The question then became, should the Articles be amended, or should they be scrapped and replaced with another form of government? And the answer to that question became the Constitution of the United States of America. Well, folks, that's it for part 1 of episode 15 on the Constitution. I hope you enjoyed our treatment of why the Constitution was needed. When you're ready, go right on to part 2, where we discuss how the Constitution happened. So thank you for watching. See you in part 2.